Hi everybody, Dr. Petrie here. This video is supposed to give my students some feedback and examples of how to turn weak writing into strong writing. For this essay, students were asked to take a position on whether or not eugenics should be considered a positive or negative movement. And this required a couple of different things. First of all, we looked at a V diagram. We actually did a gallery walk with 7 pieces of eugenics studies, 7 separate studies on eugenics that were done in the 1920s and 30s, and the students had to list them. Were they positive for society? Were they negative for society? And so on the V diagram, you have your central question in mind, and on the left-hand side, you have the positive effects, and on the right-hand side, you have the negative effects. In the bottom center, you have a thesis summary that kind of coaches you into writing a thesis statement that takes a position. In this case, the eugenics movement should be viewed as positive or negative because of the following 3 reasons. So this was one of the things that my students paired up and talked about after they had finished the gallery walk. I asked them each to collect 6 pieces of evidence from the positive effects and the negative effects. And for homework that night, they actually had to go home and, after the discussion, write their thesis statement. So we use what's called a chicken foot, chicken leg for this. You write down your main idea, your 3 key points, and then you're going to use the evidence that you've collected in your essay to support these points. So the overall prompt from the essay was the eugenics movement positive or negative? And I asked my students to write in the 3rd person. I asked them to define the academic terms they use because they're showing off for their teacher. And I remind them that in a background paragraph or an introductory paragraph, it should be about 5 to 8 sentences, and it should really demonstrate that you are an expert on this area. Lastly, we use this technique called the meal paragraph, which is main idea, evidence, analysis, where you describe what the evidence means, and then you link it back to the main idea, or in this case, your argument. So, this example is what I call the Jane Schaeferization of middle school writing. Many of my 9th graders still suffer from this. This method is highly structured, and it asks the students to explicitly declare the purpose of each essay, or I'm sorry, the purpose of each paragraph in the essay. So you get very robotic. In this essay, I will be talking about, in this paragraph, I will be explaining. It kind of sounds a little bit like a robot is writing it instead of a real person. While I should be grateful that my students have had or they remember writing instruction from middle school, in high school, we kind of have to reset the expectations. They should be considered the expert. They should be writing in the voice of an expert, using academic language, and using the 3rd person. I explained to them that their mom isn't reading this essay, and outside of this classroom and their mom, nobody cares what they think. You have to write like an academic, you have to make a solid argument, and you have to use evidence. So, let's take a look at another example. This student, I like how they made up their own title, The Positivity of Good Breeding. I'm not sure if positivity is an actual word. If it is, it's certainly spelled wrong here. The eugenics movement is the science of good breeding. That's a definition. Yay! Eugenics gave the benefits of having a child with good qualities. Good in quotation marks. This is what we call foreshadowing. I'm betting that this student is going to write a positive essay about eugenics. It also gave the government power to sterilize the women who probably weren't suited to have children due to some disorders or bad qualities they may have. Also true. Good background on eugenics. Therefore, ding, 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 a transition phrase. This is telling me to pay attention. Therefore, eugenics was a positive thing to society or community because it prevents hereditary diseases, keeps criminals from having children along with mentally ill people, allows blood tests before marriage, and birth defects are prevented. So in this case, by the way, this is a great thesis. She's listed 3 points that are going to make her argument, and she's just doing a little bit of foreshadowing here where that all of these things, the positive of eugenics, has prevented birth defects. I would save that for the next paragraph where you actually talk about this. So to recap, she has a good definition, good foreshadowing about where she's going in this essay. I would suggest you need to produce at least 5 to 8 sentences to be accepted as an expert. I'd like to hear more about the history of eugenics. I'd like to hear some of the names of the people we talked about in class. But overall, this is a pretty good example, and what I'm thrilled about is that there's a great transition phrase here that calls your attention to a very solid and workable thesis sentence. This person is on their way to an A. Next up, I think eugenics is a good thing. I think it is a good thing because eugenics is trying not to pass on diseases to the upcoming babies. I think eugenics is technically trying to make the perfect baby. Thinking about eugenics makes me think about the perfect baby. A baby without diseases like heart problems, low blood pressure, asthma, and many more. So this is not all bad. We can rebuild this. We have the technology. This is what I talked about earlier, the Jane Schaeferization. This person is stuck into using the first person mentality. So what we have to do is show them how easy it is to convert first person writing, which I consider weak, to third person writing, which I consider strong. So let's do it. All we do is cover up the I thinks and the me's, because again, no one cares about you except for your mother, and she's not reading this essay. So here you say, eugenics is a good thing. It is a good thing because eugenics is trying not to pass on diseases to the upcoming babies or unborn babies. Eugenics is technically trying to make the perfect baby. Eugenics uses good breeding techniques to make the perfect baby. A baby without diseases like heart problems, low blood pressure, asthma, and many more. This person is clearly arguing that eugenics is positive. We could help them out by giving them more to say, the definition of eugenics, the time period that eugenics was popular, some famous people who used eugenics or were involved in the movement, and then we have to explicitly get them to declare their thesis statement in the last sentence of the introductory paragraph. If this person had added this type of writing, again, they would be on their way to an A. So, now that you have seen 2 examples of effective writing about eugenics, what I want you to do for the next 10 minutes is to repair this paragraph. All you're going to do is add some background, and you're going to conclude the paragraph with a 3-legged thesis statement that makes a definitive answer of the prompt. Is it positive or negative? It cannot be both. So pick one side, argue it. I look forward to reading it. Thank you very much.